hope you're ready for a wild, bumpy ride of a sculpting video because I'm not just sculpting something from scratch this time. I'm going to actually be changing a sculpture from, well, sort of almost realistic into something a little bit more my style, which is the monsters, the surreal. Okay, let me start over again. I started off this sculpture by making Michael Keaton as Beetlejuice in the original movie, and while it was going well, I was just not really feeling it because, well, my usual style is surreal and monsters and just the crazy stuff. But Beetlejuice is my favorite movie, and as the new Beetlejuice just came out, I wanted to celebrate and make some sculptures that were, well, from the first movie because I hadn't seen the second one yet. But since the original Beetlejuice mask wasn't really turning out for me because I wasn't into the realism, I decided to remake it into the Beetlejuice Snake Head, where that scene where he comes down the banister, Beetlejuice turns himself into a monster. It was just a lot more fun in my mind. So we had to remake him from a normal looking demon, I suppose, into an even scarier demon, which was definitely more my style. So the sculpture was a lot more adding and subtracting than usual, which was a totally different way to work, but it was a lot of fun. If you know anything about ceramics, it's just a constant battle between different wetnesses of clay, I should say, and having to worry about keeping everything the same moisture level. So in between all these clips, there was a lot of days of putting him back into my little damp box and equalizing the moisture so that everything was the same moisture level throughout, because that's very important. So his mouth was looking a little bit too realistic, so I gotta squish it all into shape. And of course, removing the teeth, removing the eyes, everything has to be a little bit more accentuated, everything needs to be bigger, and of course you can't forget that you can't have clay that ends up being too thick, or else it runs the risk of having moisture and exploding in the kiln. These eyeballs, I'm already feeling it so much more than the original sculpture, so I know that I'm on the right track. It's going to be a lot better. After I did the eyeballs, I did flip him around and carve out even more of the clay from behind so it wasn't too thick. So I had this harebrained idea where the head wasn't going to be hollow. So instead of making teeth, I decided to save time and kind of do like a relief kind of sculpture in his mouth. I was gonna carve away the teeth, and I thought it would save me time, and honestly, it really didn't. It made my life a lot more difficult, but that is neither here nor there. That's how it is when you learn. So this tool, my little silicone pencil, I suppose, is probably my favorite. My favorite part of sculpting is always adding the details, especially when it makes things look more realistic. But if you're doing any kind of sculpting, I definitely recommend getting these silicone tools. You can get them on Amazon. It doesn't have to be this one. This one's specifically for pottery. I actually got it from somebody else. They gifted it to me. I was very fortunate, but I have a lot more silicone tools that work just as well. And of course, you can't forget the trusty old sponge that makes your sculpture look a lot better, as well as the paintbrush. You just gotta smooth everything out and it goes from looking from meh to looking a lot better. So here I am trying to carve out the teeth in clay that is admittedly still way too wet to be dealing with, but I kept going because I'm impatient. And that's okay, because playing with mud is just what I'm after anyways. So because this guy will be hanging suspended in a drink container and he's meant to be food safe, I wanted him to be hollow, of course, but I wanted it to be a closed form. So that's why I didn't just make teeth and make his mouth open. Even though I did end up putting a couple holes in the top of his head so that I could suspend him, but at least he's still food safe. So to make this guy look pretty from all angles, I had to make a back of his head, and this was my solution to making his hair detailed without putting a ton of extra clay on the back, because it'll be hanging in a glass container. So I don't want it to be too heavy because I'm also going to be hanging it from fishing wire. As I say this out loud, I honestly, I don't know what I was thinking, but I was making it for my dad, so I was going to try and make it work. So I've got the back of his head on, and I made some snakes of clay to give it a little extra dimension, and I made sure that they weren't too thick so that they wouldn't hold moisture. I did end up putting this guy outside in the sun to evaporate some extra moisture before I put him in the kiln, just to make sure, because unfortunately he did end up a little thicker than I wanted him to. So I know the character, the snake guy in the movie, doesn't have like these snaky hair tendrils all over, but I couldn't use actual real hair, and making something look all fluffy and crazy hair with ceramic is just above my pay grade, so I went with the snakes, and I think he turned out pretty good. And now I underglaze him, put a clear coat of glaze on top of him, and he's done.